Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Kafchet. We are at the top of Kafchet Amud Aleph. Let me share my screen and we will get started. So yesterday we concluded by noting that while a man is required to separate from his wife because the city was overrun by the enemy, could live in the same courtyard as his wife, even though they needed to separate, because again, the concern is that either that we're talking about a Kohen and if she was violated, so then she's not allowed to go back to him, or we're talking about a concern as per Rashi that in fact, she may have participated willingly, not truly willingly, but in order to save her own skin. And so as a result, there is this concern that maybe she needs to separate from her husband. And so today we're going to pick back up with the question of, well, what happens if they both want to live in the same town and they both want to live in the same courtyard? So who gets to decide who gets to be there? So let's do this. Here we go. And so now let's get started. So we're going to pick up on the second word on the third line of Kafchet Amud Aleph. So mi nidcha mipnei mi, who is being displaced by whom? Meaning, does the man get to decide that he gets to live there now that they're divorced, or need to get divorced, or does she get to decide? Okay, and so the Gemara answers, Tashma, at the time we have a brisa that tells us the actual rule. He nidches mi panav, ve'ein hu nidche mi paneha. That she needs to, if she needs to be, she is displaced by him, and he is not displaced by her. Meaning that the husband gets to decide where he wants to live. Im haisa chatzer shalah, and we'll explain why in a moment. But if she actually owned the piece of property in the courtyard, well, then then he has to leave, and she gets to stay. So they asked the question, what if they both own property in the courtyard? Then what? So Tashma. So let's take a look at the brisa that we just said. What did we say? He nidches mi panav. She's displaced by him. B'mayaskin. Now, what case are we talking about? If you say that it's because he owns a piece of the chutzner, well, then that's pretty obvious that we would want her to have to leave for his benefit. So we must talk about maybe we're talking about when she owns a piece of the chutzner, but that can't be because v'hatanya im haisa chutzner shala hu nidchemi panah. But we said in connection with her owning a piece of the courtyard that in fact he is displaced by her. So when we said that she's displaced by him, it can't be talking about where she owns a piece of the courtyard. And we clearly don't need to tell it when he's owning a piece of the courtyard. So elalav ki hai gavna. So it must be like this case, namely that both of them own a piece of the courtyard. So the Gemara says, no, that's not such a great proof. Dilma de Agyr Megar. Maybe they're both renting. Meaning, so again, the question is who needs to leave because of whom? And we're going to say, so right now, the point is that we don't know, the answer if they both own a piece of property. So in general, she needs to leave because of him and not him leaving because of her. But if she owns a piece of the property, then she gets to stay. And we're not sure what happens if they both own a piece of property. So my Havi Allah. So what was the decision made? So Tashma. So come in here. We'll give you another proof. Hinei Hashem mitaltelcha taltela gaver. That this pasuk from Yeshaya says, that Hashem is going to cause you to wander the wandering of a man. That's meant to be a bad thing. So va'amarav taltule de gavra kashan mideitza. That the idea is that a wandering man is, it's harder on him to make new friends than it is on her. And so as a result, we will displace her as opposed to him based on this concept that making a man move is going to cause greater hardship than making the woman move. Okay, so now so now that we've talked about that, we've been talking about the protections to ensure that a Kohen and his divorcee do not get back together. So the Gemara quotes another brisa with an additional rule. So Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Lava Hemena b'nichsei aviha. What happens if the husband had borrowed some money from the wife, and now they get divorced? All right. So now the question is the woman needs to collect the money from her husband. So what we don't want them to be together because we're worried that something will happen. And we're talking about a Kohen and his divorcee. And again, because a Kohen is not allowed to get back together with his divorcee. So Eina Nifras Ella Al Yadei Acher. So she should only engage in collection through an agent. She shouldn't engage in collection through directly, because we're worried again that that they're having a conversation will result in their potentially having marital relations, which is prohibited. So Amar of Sheshes the Asul Kamen Ladina Lo Mizda Kininan like. So if the two of them were to come to court to try and resolve some kind of disagreement associated with it, we won't even allow them both to attend, because again, we're worried that they're coming together. Now, for example, let's say, she has a contract, and that means that she has access to a lien on his real property, and he sold his real property to somebody else. And so now the two of them want to come and collect effectively and he wants her to collect not from his assets, but from the assets that he sold. So as a result, that's they may be even coming together to court. So, and Rav Papa goes further. Rav Papa shamuzi mishamtinan lehu, that we actually will go so far as to excommunicate them. So not only don't we listen and hear them when they're together, but we won't even we'll excommunicate them for coming back together. Rahuna braid the Rav Yoshua Amar nagudi nami minagdinan lahu. We're going to actually punish them with lashes, because that's that's how bad it is. And not only that, but because in general we understand that excommunication is even worse than lashes. It must be that Rav Huna, since it seems like we're getting worse and worse, Rav Huna is saying that actually we both excommunicate them and give them lashes. Okay, no, it's not good. It's because we don't want them to be together, because they're not supposed to. So Amar Rav Nachman says, Tanad be Evel Rabasi. We learned in Evel Rabasi. So Evel Rabasi is a set of brisas. If we take a look in Rashi, I think here has a piece. Let's see. Bevel Rabasi, third of the narrow lines in Rashi. Masechta, it's a Masechet from the Mishnaic era. The Koronoso Smachos, but we call it Smachos because Evel Rabasi is like all the different senses of mourning, and that's exactly what it covers. But in all way, we try to use a positive language, and so we call it Masechtas Smachos. V'zuhi Mishnah Rishona Shalah, and what is the first Mishnah in it? Hagoses, that we talk about somebody who is on their deathbed. Harehu kachai l'chol dvarav, that even somebody who's on their deathbed is considered alive for all intents and purposes. And so as a result, that's Rashi is explaining, we call it smachot because it's talking about, tough things. And so that's why, but in Talmudic literature, it's also referred to as Evel Rabasi. So what does it say in Evel Rabasi? So B'med Dvar Mamurim, when do we say that a Kohen's divorcee is not allowed to collect except for when she uses an agent? Shenis Garsham min Nisuin. It's only if they engaged in the full-fledged marriage. If they only in Aval Nikishanis Garsham min Ha'erisin, if they only went through the first step of marriage, because there are two steps to marriage. The first step is Erisin, where you dedicate, they agree that they're going to get married and they're dedicated to one another. And then the second step is Nisuin, when she becomes permitted to engage in marital relations with her husband. So Nifras al Yadei Atzma. If she only engaged in Erisin, then she can collect. She ain't libo gaspa, because then she's not so familiar. They're not so familiar with one another. And so as a result, we're not worried that they're going to try and do any hanky-panky. So Hahu Aras Varusa Soda Asla Kamei de Rava. So now we're going to get a story. There was a couple that never actually fully got married. They only did the first step, and they came to Rava. And Yosef Rav Ada Bar Masna, and Rav Ada Bar Masna was sitting in front, with Rava at the time. Oki Rava Shlucha bin Tayu, and Rava appointed Rav Ada Bar Masna as the agent to prevent any kind of hanky-panky. And so as a result, but Amrle Rav Ada Bar Masna said to Rava, I don't understand. Amar Rav Nachman, Tana Be'eva Rabasi, etc. That he had said, we just learned that from the Evel Rabasi statement, that in fact, you don't need to have an agent when their separation is only after Erisin and not after Nisuin. So Amrle, Rava says to him, I can tell that these two people are very familiar with one another. And so as a result, we need to make sure that they have the protections, meaning that the underlying facts matter. And so maybe in a modern day divorce where there's a clear animosity, we might not hold these things. I don't know whether that's in fact the case. But in any event, Igud Amri, there's an alternative view of what this story was. Lo Aki Rava Shliach ben Hayu, where Rava did not set up an intermediary. And Amrle Rav Ada Bar Masna, and Rav Ada Bar Masna tried to say that maybe he should. Nekumar Shlucha bin Tayu. Why don't you set up an agent between them? Amrle Baha Amar Rav Nachman Tana Be'eva Rabasi, because we have this statement in Eva Rabasi that says we don't need to when they're only divorced from Erisin. So Amrle Rav Ada said, Hani Mili B'Dahaycha Delo Gaisiba Hadadi. That's where they're not familiar with one another. Aval Hani could Chazina Lahu de Gaisiba Hadadi. But here we could see that they are familiar with one another. So as a result, we should have an shliach. And so bottom line is that, it seems like, if they're familiar with one another, and that familiarity can be either because they were actually married or just because maybe they were dating for a long time. Either way, we might want to actually set up an agent.
During the Rusin, where does the woman eat? In her father's house? Or
yes, between Erisin and Nisuin, she continues to eat in her father's house. Exactly, and we discussed certain of the rules associated with truma in that regard. But yes, exactly. In Yehuda, the fiance would live there as well.
Is this only for coming to court on the same side of the issue?
Not clear. The way I'm reading it is that they're coming to court on the same side, but you don't have to. I think the idea is that even if they come in as, on some level, the more familiar you are with somebody, certainly in movies, this is a common theme of people getting back together. So,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In a Rusin, if the woman doesn't have a father, can the bride, the groom to be, provide her family with food?
Absolutely. He's certainly allowed to. It's just that he's not obligated to.
We did discuss that.
Yes, exactly. So ve'elu ne'emanim l'ha'id begodlan. So now the next Mishnah begins by telling us that there are certain children who, when they grow up, they will be believed to make certain statements about their childhood. So what are the statements? That these are the people who are believed when they're an adult to say that this is what they saw when they were a minor. So Ne'eman Adam Lomar, a person is believed to say, Zeksav Yado Shalaba, this is my father's writing, meaning that I recognize his handwriting. This was my father's signature. It's a valid contract. Vizek Sav Yado Shel Rebbe. This is the writing of my teacher. Then Vizek Sav Yado Shel Achi. This is my writing of my brother. So all three of those writings, and we'll discuss in the Gemara why we need to teach all three. So Zachar, then teaching number 4. Zachar Hayiti Biflonis. I remember with respect to this particular person, Sheyatsu Behinuma Birosha Parua, that when she went to her wedding, she went out wearing a numa, some kind of veil. We saw that in Rashi earlier in this Maseches, and that her hair was loose. So as a result, that indicated that she was a betula. She had not been married previously. V'shahaya ish poloni yotze mi beis hasefer litbo le'echol b'truma, and I remember seeing this person, some person, go out of school with me, and we went together, and we went to the mikvah and were tovel, and then we went in order to eat truma. The shahaya kolek imanu ala goren, and he would divide truma with us at the granary, meaning that this is somebody who was a kohen. All right, so that's number 5 of the reason of the things of the statements. In addition, this location is a beis hapras. A beis hapras is a field that had a burial plot in it, had somebody buried, and so the bones were buried there. But then, unfortunately, somebody went ahead and plowed it. And so as a result, because they didn't bury people very deeply, the person's bones were all chopped up and are now throughout the entire field. And so as a result, you're not allowed to go into such a field, or if one who goes into such a field will become tamei. And finally, the 7th possible remembrance is that I remember that this is where we went to on Shabbos, meaning this is how far the Eruv went. This is how far Tchum Shabbos, was. So, aval ein adam ne'eman lomar derech haya leploni b'makom hazeh. But you cannot believe me. You're not going to believe the child who grows up and says, I remember that James had a path in this field, or Ma'amad umisped haya leploni b'makom hazeh, or I remember that this person had a custom of stopping and giving eulogies in this particular location, indicating that he actually owned the location. And so the bottom line is we'll see that to transfer money, this kind of testimony is not valid. Okay, so now we're going to analyze this, and this is, of course, the last Mishnah of the second. The first 5 things are going to all relate to status, and there will be a question. The Rishonim deal with the question of whether or not, if it has to do with money also, then does it have. But for example, with the contract, even though the underlying contract may have to do with money, the testimony is just testifying that the witnesses are valid, not about the underlying facts. Okay, so the Gemara begins, and the Gemara begins by discussing the 3 cases of the handwriting to explain. All right, so first we're going to explain, what exactly the memory is, and then we're going to deal with why we need all 3. So Rav Huna Brei Rav Yoshua v'hu sheyesh gadol imo. The first thing is that you need another witness, meaning in all these cases we're talking about 2 witnesses validating signatures, not 1 witness, and that's what we saw before. You can have 1 witness if each of the witnesses written on the document testify to their own signature, then we're fine. But according to at least one view that we saw earlier. But if you don't have any of those 2 witnesses who actually signed on the document, then we need 2 witnesses to validate each of their signatures. And so this child can be one of the witnesses, but the other witness can't be a child witness. It can't be a child who grew up. Again, in each case, this is a child who grew up and is testifying based on the knowledge that came to him when he was a child. All right, utsricha, and we need all three teachings. Because if we just taught about the father, the reason that you recognize the father's handwriting is because you spend a lot of time with your father, right? And so aval rabo, but maybe not your teacher. So the iyashmein and rabo, and if you know, we say that we only know that you can recognize your teacher's handwriting, mishum de islay amos amsay de rabbe. Well, in those days, you were afraid of your teacher because you didn't do the right thing. They were going to smack you. And so as a result, you had, you paid very close attention to what your teachers were saying. So so as a result, aval aviv lo, but not necessarily, you wouldn't have had that same kind of fear with respect to your father. And so as a result, maybe you wouldn't know his handwriting as well as you would know your teacher. And if we only had these two, so then maybe it's only because you need either the frequency or the fear. But when it comes to your brother, you don't have either with respect to him. Amalo, maybe I would say that doesn't exist. You won't have that same kind of recognition, and therefore we shouldn't believe the person. So Kamash Malan, that's why our Mishnah needs to teach us all three. Kaven de Kiyum Shtaris Midirabanan, Himnu Rabbanan Bidirabanan. So as a result, because this act of acknowledging a shtar is just rabbinic, meaning on some level, if you have a valid contract that we say that we have no concern, no reason to be concerned about. For example, you have a check, that's a valid contract. You don't need to have any special recognitions. And so midoraisa. And so as a result, the rabbis say that we're going to be lenient in what is sufficient proof to enable us to confirm the signatures on the contract. So now we go on to the next case of the Mishnah. Zachor hayiti biflon sheyatza v'hinuma v'rosha parua. We remember this woman. She went out to her wedding, with the veil and her hair down and her hair loose. So my time, what's the reason that we're going to be believed with respect to this? Meaning, on some level, some people understand this, that maybe because there's a financial component to it, we are going to be concerned that this is actually treated as a monetary issue, and we should say that you need two fully valid witnesses. Well, Kaven derov nashim besuos nisos galui milsa ba'almahu, because we saw this whole concept earlier. Most women get married for the first time. And so as a result, this is just confirming that it was a first marriage. And so as a result, that's why we're going to allow this testimony to be sufficient. And again, remember that what we did was we said, yes, most women are first marriages, but usually those marriages are in public and people will all remember. So the fact that if somebody didn't remember, that would suggest that maybe it wasn't a first marriage. So in any event, now that we have this kind of memory, so then this kind of memory is going to be sufficient to put us back into the situation of the fact that we can follow the majority. All right. So I remember this fellow schoolmate who would go out and eat truma with me. The Dilma Eved Kohen, who maybe this guy was a servant of a Kohen. And slaves of Kohanim are allowed to eat truma. So how do I know that in fact he was actually a Kohen himself? So Messiah Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. This Mishnah must support Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, because the Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Asar la'adam she'yalamed es abdo Torah. You're not allowed to teach your servants Torah. And so as a result, if in fact this person is remembered to have gone to school together, well, then that shows that in fact, it must be that he's a Kohen because he actually learned Torah. V'lo, And when second, so now we're going to challenge that. Maybe you can teach a servant Torah, because we're going to see in a brisa that it references a servant who knows Torah. Tanya lava himenu rabo. If a master borrows something from a servant, osha asa o rabo, or he apotropos, or he makes the servant a guardian over his property. Osha hinich tefillin b'fnei rabo. Or if the servant puts on tefillin, which is a mitzvah aseh shazman grama, and so as a result, the slaves are not obligated to do that. Or he reads 3 verses in the Torah, meaning he gets some kind of aliyah. That does not mean that the person was set free. So one might have thought that each of these indications were an indication that the servant was no longer a servant and that he's in fact free. But what did we see here? We saw that one of them was reading 3 psukim. So Hasam de Ikri Eved Midaito. So there we're talking about where he learned on his own. So Kikamrina de Kanaheg Be Minhag Banim. The point that of what we're saying is prohibited is to formally go and teach him the way you would teach your child. And so as a result, the fact that this child went to school is an indication that he's not an Eved. So litbo le'echol b'truma. Yes?
What's the reason why you can't do that? Why he's not supposed to? Are we talking about Jewish?
Yeah, well, we're talking about we were talking about a non-Jewish slave that is treated like a, for halakhic purposes is considered like a woman. And they're not bound by mitzvah shasman grama.
That's what the Bright is talking about too?
Yes, that's what the Bright, that's what, when we say Eved and Shifcha, we are, unless we say Eved Ivri, we are almost always talking about Eved Kanani. So we're talking about somebody who is not Jewish, who is enslaved, either by Jews or purchased by Jews, and thereby effectively goes through an initial conversion, an initial step of conversion, and then has an obligation to observe certain of the mitzvot. But they are not, but the idea is that they are not supposed to be taught Torah. And of course, one can understand why.
How could they do the mitzvot without learning Torah?
No, because it means not learning Torah directly. You can teach them, what actions they're supposed to take, but you're not supposed to teach them the underlying rules that are associated with it. And we saw one of the reasons that you wouldn't want to do that, because if during the course of the Tvila, they are able to sort of say, this Tvila is for me to become Jewish fully, then actually they become Jewish and they don't become your slave. So, there was that. I don't know if you remember that, but that there was that whole discussion. I barely remember it, but in any event, the point is that so there's reasons that we don't want to teach them various rules. The question is does this also apply to non-Jews? We've seen elsewhere during our time together the rule that says that we shouldn't teach non-Jews Torah. The question is does that still apply in today's day or not? It's an interesting question.
So don't teach them Torah because you might lose out financially?
Yeah, that's certainly what that Gemara over there, when we saw that whole concept of that you had to make sure that you were always, you had to keep your hands on them during the course of the tefillah so that they were effectively working for you during the tefillah, so that you would make sure that they would be, or you had a collar around them that you, to indicate. So, that was, there are a number of reasons. That's obviously one reason. The Rishonim give a number of reasons that we don't want to teach them Torah, but that seems to me to be the most significant reason.
Well, I mean, that's just like not that you can't do it, but that that's just like a practical advice. But here,
Yes, that's true. That would be a practical advice perspective, but
here it sounds like it's
correct.
More than that it's not allowed for some reason.
Correct, and they do have to observe Shabbat. Is it like a non-Jew can't observe Shabbat? I mean, I think on some level, I guess so. I think so. I'm not sure. I don't know whether it'll be exactly like that. I mean, certainly it's not Chayav Misa the way we say that a non-Jew who's observes Shabbat is subject to the death penalty. So, okay. So, all right. So now we get to the immersion. So again, litbo le'echol betruma. And so the Gemara qualifies and says, betruma d'Rabbanan. We're only talking about rabbinic truma. So as a result, we're not talking about biblical truma, and that this is only going to be a sufficient proof to allow somebody to have rabbinic truma. All right. And I remember that he would divide truma with us in the granary. And so Vidilma Eved Kohen, how do I know that this guy's not an Eved Kohen? Again, presumably on this one, that the idea is that this is the only thing that you memorize. So somehow at this step, we're assuming, what if you only remember that? So Tanan Kimanda Amar Ein Cholkin Truma LeEved Ela Im Kain Rabo Imo. This is based on this must be according to the opinion that you only will divide truma in the granary to a slave, if his master is with him. And we have we have a brisa that's going to talk about this particular topic. And as an introduction to the brisa, it's important to note that this brisa is talking about a situation where there are two people who were confused at birth and we're unsure which is an actual Kohen and which is the son is the slave of a Kohen. And so the brisa continues to Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Ein cholken truma le'eved ela im kain rabo imo. You're not allowed to distribute, according to the Tanna Kama, truma to a slave unless his teacher, his master is with him. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yachol Hushi Omer, that he's allowed to receive it because he could say the following. Again, we're now talking about this person who we're not sure whether he's a Kohen or he's a slave of a Kohen, because he could say Yachol Hushi Omer Im Kohen ani Tani li b'shvil atzmi. If I'm actually a Kohen, so then give me because I'm the Kohen. Bim Eved Kohen ani Tanuli b'shvil Rabbi. And if I'm the Eved if I'm the servant, the slave of a Kohen, give me because of my master. So Rabbi Yossi says that you can give it to him. And so as a result, our Mishnah must be following Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you cannot give it to a slave Kohen, the slave of a Kohen. So bimkomo shel Rabbi Yehuda. So in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, so hayu ma'alin mitruma liyochasin. If you were in a place of Rabbi Yehuda, then if you received truma at the granary, well, then it must indicate that you are a full-fledged Kohen. So if you get truma at the granary, we'll allow you to say that you are a 100% Kohen that is totally kosher.
Is this still a Braita?
This is no. This is now the Gemara explaining the ramifications of this dispute that was in the Brisa.
Okay.
Bimkomo shel Rabbi Yossi. However, when it comes to the location of Rabbi Yossi, lo hayumalim mitruma yochasin. We would not say that indicates some kind of ability, because he's actually the servant of a Kohen, and so therefore we can't allow the fact that somebody receives truma at the granary to use that as proof that they are in fact a Kohen. So Tanya, we learned in another brisa, Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, Miyamai lo he'adti. All my days, I never testified about presumably somebody's Kohen status. But Pam Achad ha'adti. But one time I did. V'hevelu eved l'chuna alpi. And as a result, they made a servant into a Kohen because of what I did. So the Gemara wonders, Elu salkadaita, could it be that they actually made him into a Kohen? Ashta behemta. But we say that the animals of the righteous, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu, maybe Takala al Yadam, the God won't even bring bad things through the animals of a righteous person. So certainly, tzaddikim atzum lo kol shekain, certainly when it comes to the righteous people themselves, can't be that we have some kind of mistake like that. Ella bikshu lahalos eved lechuna alpi. Rather, the point is they wanted to make the person a kohen as a result of what he said. And why? What happened? Chaza ba'asrei de Rabbi Yossi. He had seen this all happen in Rabbi Yossi's location. And so, but va'azal va'asid ba'asra de Rabbi Yehuda. But he testified it in Rabbi Yehuda's location. So in Rabbi Yehuda's location, we can say that the person must be a kohen because he got truma at the granary. But in fact, he had seen it in the location where we don't say that. And so as a result, only after they were able to resolve where it was that he had seen it, so then they were able to get the actual facts and determine that this person shouldn't be a kohen. So, and what about the fact that we say that this place is a beis hapras? My time, what's the reason that we accept this person's testimony? So beis hapras derabanan, because again, these are all different aspects of rabbinic requirements. The Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, minapeach adam beis hapras v'holek. A person is able to go through a beis hapras and just blow on the ground and make sure that they don't see any bones. Rav Yehuda bar Ami, mishmei the Rav Yehuda Amar beis hapras shenidash tahor. That if in fact there are thousands of people walking over a piece of property, even if it was a beis hapras, it will become tahor because then there won't be anything left. So my taima, because anything that would be the size of a barley grain, if you had thousands of people walking over the property, so then it will certainly be trampled and there won't be anything left. And there won't be anything that size. And so as a result, there wouldn't be any tumah that would be potential. Va'ad kan hayinu v'in b'Shabbos. This is how far we got on Shabbos. And again, kasaver tchum and derabanan must be that tchum Shabbos is only rabbinic. V'ein ne'eman lomar. And then we said a person is not trusted to say derech haya leploni b'makom hazeh, that this person had a path in this field, because that would be a transfer of ownership. Mamadu mispid haya leploni b'makom zeh, or this person had a spot where he would give eulogies and stop a funeral procession in this location. So my time, why not? So apuke mamona lo melptina, because we're not going to remove money from one person to another based on this kind of rabbinic testimony, only that it's not biblically approved testimony. So Tana Rabbanan, Neman Hatzinok Lomar, but we have a brisa that says a child is trusted to say, and Rashi explains laha'id begodlo, to testify when he grows up. So kach amar li abba, this is what my father said to me, mishpacha zo tahora, mishpacha zo tmeya, that this family is tahor, this family is tameh. Well, what does that mean? Tahoro tmeya salkataita, could it mean that they're actually tahor and tameh? No, of course not. That there's no concept of tahara or tuma for a family. Ela mishpacha zu kshero, mishpacha zu psula. We're talking about whether or not they have any kind of blemish in their genealogy. V'sha'achalnu b'kitzatza shall base ploni uploni. And so these are two additional rules that we're going to have in this brisa. And so rule number one is that we can trust a child who remembers that his father said a particular family is kosher or not kosher. And we can trust that if the child says, I remember that we ate the kitzatza of this daughter who married this girl and this boy who got married. So what is that kitzatza? We'll see that in a moment. But v'shahayinu molichin chala umatanas leploni kohen. And we can do the testimony that I remember that this stuff went to a particular kohen, that we brought chala to kohen, this kohen named C. And so we'll trust that he is in fact a kohen. Al yedei atzmo, aval lo al yedei acher. However, when we say that he's believed, he's only going to believe if he testifies that he himself brought the challah. If he only testifies that somebody else said it, so then that is not sufficient. So let's take a look and say how these, and the chulan, in all of these cases, imhaya ovid kochavim v'niskayer, if he was not Jewish and then converted, so he's remembering back to when he was a non-Jew, Evid unishtachrer, or he was a slave and then freed, einam on him. Then he's not believed about his testimony about what happened before he became Jewish. The einam man lomar, and again, consistent with the end of our Mishnah, he's not believed to say derech haya leploni b'makom zeh. This person had a path in this location, mamadu misbed haya leploni b'makom zeh, or this person had a custom to stop and to eulogize in this location. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, however, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka disagrees, and he says ne'emanim. They are believed. Now, who does that refer to? So that's the beginning question that we're going to ask, and with that, we'll then conclude our second perek, and we'll leave for the third perek, God willing, tomorrow. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, ahaya, which one is he going on? Ilema asefa, if you say that's referring to the end of the Mishnah or end of the Brisa, apuki mamonahu, then he's trying to take money away. We don't allow that. So Ella Aresha, it must be that he's referring to the Resha. The Chulam, and what aspect of the Resha? We said the Chulam imhaya obed kochavim v'niskayer eben v'nishtachrer ein ne'emanim. That he says that the Tanakama said that we don't believe a Gentile who converts or a slave who is freed. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka omer ne'emanim. No, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says no, we do believe them. So, but what are they arguing about? Why is it that sometimes we don't believe them and sometimes we do believe them? So Tanakama Savar. So the first Tana says, Kavan de Ovid Kochavim, who lo havadayak, because they were at that moment not Jewish, so they're not going to be as precise in their observances. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Savar, Kavan de Daita Iguyure, Midak Havadayak. That since they knew that they were going to be potentially Jewish, so then they will be precise. And so, the way I'm understanding it is that on some level, Hashem has a hand in who becomes Jewish, whether through conversion or even through the freeing of a slave. And so as a result, those people must have had some additional ability. And so they do have the ability to have pay that kind of attention. Okay, so now we go back to the Brisa and answer the question of my Ketzatza. What is this Ketzatza that the kid is remembering that he participated in? So Titana Rabbanan, Ketza Ketzatza. How do you do this Ketzatza thing? Echad min ha'achim shenasa isha she'ena hogeneslo. So we're talking about where one of the brothers of a family, one of the children of a family, marries somebody who's not fit, meaning that she will taint now the genealogy of the family. So Ba and Bnei Mishpacha, so the rest of the family members, they all come and they say, and they bring a big barrel full of fruit, and they break the barrel, sort of like a piñata. They break the barrel in the middle of the town in the public square. And they say, Achenu Beis Yisrael Shimu. All of the town members who are our brothers from Israel, listen. Our brother married somebody who he shouldn't have married. And we're worried that his children will be confused with our children. So bo kulachem dugma ladoros. So come take, and Rashi explains that dugma here is an oath, a sign. Take a sign for yourself for the generations. Shaloyis arev zaro bizarenu, because so that we don't want his children to mixed up with our children. V'zohi ketzatza shatinok nemen laha'idalaha. And that kind of ceremony, you can imagine, that's pretty memorable ceremony. That's the kind of ceremony that will allow a child to testify about. So Hadron Allah Aisha Shenis Armala, Hadron Allah Aisha Shenis Armala, Hadron Allah Aisha Shenis Armala. God willing, we should be able to learn this parak over and over again and have many opportunities. So
what was the issue here?
They take the fruit. They take some fruit. And that fruit, and maybe even they eat the fruit, presumably. I mean, they don't want to let it go to waste. Yeah, well, exactly, won't be a sign for very long. So, yeah, maybe they had peaches. They could have had peaches. Yes, Hanan.
Well, what does that mean? What are you understanding is Eno Hagenet?
Oh, I'm understanding that this is somebody who will taint, so maybe she's, she, what? She has a, maybe her, she herself is a mamzer, or she's from a family with it that include mamzerim, or she's a nesina, she's from a family that isn't fully Jewish and is considered to be suffix mamzerim, or she's a divorcee and he's a Kohen, or
So
or she's a halala and he's a Kohen. But
it's not a chashash. It's not a chashash. It's or it's definite or it's just a chashash.
I think it's got to be at least a sufficient chashash that we would tell people not to marry the person. Meaning, but I don't know for a fact that even a concern, but certainly the language that is used seems to be that it's a definite. So we can assume at the moment that it's definite. I'm not sure that whether that would also apply if it were not definite.
So that it's a public embarrassment
That is absolutely a public embarrassment, 100%.
for the wedding. Is that
Not clear whether it would be done before the wedding. It's interesting. Not clear whether it would be done before the wedding. Clearly, it's being done in connection with the wedding. You want to make sure that this ceremony gets remembered so that people don't come and join and think that whatever their children's rule is would apply to your children.
they're trying to dissuade the couple from actually marrying or something, or
Sorry, say that one more time.
want to dissuade them from actually marrying? Like they don't.
It's not clear whether it's before. If it's before the wedding, then absolutely the point is to dissuade them from marrying. But it's not clear that it's before the wedding because, at the same time, do you want to do it before the wedding? So it seems like, let's just look at the language again, just to be sure, right? So it says, shenasa, right? It seems like they already married. So I think that it's that is even beyond Erisin, they've actually done Nisuin. So it seems like it's after the wedding that, then right. My guess is that probably like many Jewish mothers would, the mom says, by the way, you marry this person, we're going to have to do the kitzatza, this kitzatza ceremony with you. And of course, kitzatza means like to break, to separate. So I think that's what's going on. So presumably the threat of what would happen was part of the whole experience.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Have a good day. Be well. Bye-bye.